Next up is Jerry Voigt, PE. He is the ACPA Chief Operating Officer and Vice President and CEO at the Illinois office in Chicago. I first met Jerry, I'm sure he doesn't remember, but I do, back in 1988 or 89. Now it's hard to remember back that far because we were pretty young then, Jerry. You had just been announced as a new engineer coming on board at ACPA, and he stuck it out. He made it this far. The only problem I have is you're a Cubs fan. And the only thing that's probably worse than being a Cubs fan is being an Eagles fan, right, Jim Kuiper? Yeah, it's tough. So next up, Jerry Voigt's going to talk to us a little bit about things that are going on in the concrete world from the national level. Jerry.
Good morning. All right, let's, got my clicker. We're ready to rock and roll. Thank you for inviting me to the program once again this year. I'm certainly pleased to be here. Looks like we got great attendance, and thank you to, again, from the national perspective, for the exhibitors and everybody that's supporting the efforts out here. And it was nice to see the chart that John showed with the square yards growing here, and that's a testament not only to the industry and to the work that the chapter promoters are doing, but also to those that are working in the agency and looking for projects and working to ensure that you have viable alternatives. And concrete plays a role in that. So we thank you very much for that. What I'd like to share this morning is a little bit about we'll show you some national numbers in terms of how the market looks for concrete paving, and a few of our national initiatives, fill you in on some of the things we've been doing and some of the things we are working on and toward. And then I have a message I'd like to talk about with you with regard to implementing technology. And Jeff, when you had everybody stand up here a few minutes ago, you know, you used the word team, right? This is the concrete pavement team in Pennsylvania. And man, it couldn't be a better segue into the message that I want to deliver this morning, and I hope that you take away with you, is that when it comes to advancement, and it's an interesting term, how do you advance? I mean, how do we advance as an industry? Is it just getting work, or is it doing our work better? How do you look at that? So I want to talk a little bit about that, and I think your segue was really apropos for my message. So I appreciated that you had everybody stand up and take a look around, because we are the team here, and that's what it takes to get things to happen. So let's start here. What's the outlook? What's the outlook for concrete paving from a national perspective? So first of all, I'd like, I think the way we look at it is this industry is still transitioning. We went through a pretty tough time. We all did, with the Great Recession and the after effects of that on the industry and the buying power that the state of Pennsylvania had, as well as many states around the country, the challenge that put our agency folks in. So there's, and then that translated down to the challenge that each one of us in our roles in the businesses also had. So it's been a challenging last decade, roughly, that we've experienced. And for the ACPA and our chapters, it's been a rather dynamic time, because we've seen different things happening with businesses in our industry, consolidations and pressures on those businesses. And so that translates into pressure on the association. But I think the good news, and the thing that makes us cautiously optimistic right now, is that we see some of that stuff stabilizing and beginning to turn around in a really meaningful way. And so we're optimistic on the future. Perhaps cautiously optimistic is a little bit of a governor on it, but as we look forward, just taking stock in some things, like you should know that the contractor base, and that's primarily who ACPA we're contractor-led, but we're an industry-based association. Our contractor numbers are very, very strong. In fact, we're at or near the very peak of our all-time high in numbers of contractors as members of ACPA across the country. And we've done that, we've achieved that, despite those pressures that we've been on, despite consolidations and in some cases loss of businesses that they just simply went out of business because of the very harsh climate that we've gone through. So that shows some strength, that shows some interest in concrete paving, and we've seen companies from that primarily did asphalt paving, for instance, that picked up concrete paving, and a number of those companies have joined ACPA to take advantage of some of the things that we have to offer. So we're if you look at that as a measure, we're pretty pleased, and we want to continue to grow that. We've got an effort going forward to continue to educate folks out there about the value of the association. But perhaps for all of us in the room, maybe something that we've not experienced in quite some time is that infrastructure funding is on the radar screen. We're hearing it in the news media. Now, if you're like me, you only spend so much time listening to the news anymore because it's crazy out there. But the good news in there and all that noise that we're hearing is that infrastructure funding and the potential for some turnaround, a meaningful, real turnaround in replacing the buying value and perhaps investing more in infrastructure. It's out there. It's being talked about. It hasn't really been talked about in a decade. So it's very heartening, I think, to see and hear that. And I'll get to the highway market in a minute, but I also want to just a brief mention of the airport market. That's a pretty important market to the concrete pavement industry. And I don't know how many folks in the room here deal in that market, but as we see it, it's the volume of paving, concrete paving in the airport market nationwide is pretty steady. Whether that's FAA or any of the 3 branches of the military that do that type of work. But what we see and what we've been experiencing is that those specifications are pretty tight. And any of the contractors that work under those specifications that are in the room today know what I'm talking about. They're very difficult. We've learned a lot working with the P501 specification and the 321311 military specification. When we've learned a lot about locking down specifications so tight that there's conflicting passages and things like that. There's a lot of difficult challenges that contractors face in working through those, and we're supporting on many projects contractors that are going through those types of challenges. And so you can see, I think, a statistic on the screen here is and just the work that we've done, and that's not everything. We estimate about $10 million in trying to find engineering solutions to challenges that would otherwise possibly end up in lawsuits or just removals of pavements that just did not make sense, that did not fall back on engineering. So what we're trying to do moving forward in this market is really to help improve those specifications. So that's my comment on the airport market, but probably most of you in the room are more interested in the highway market. And what's the climate there? And again, I mentioned we've gone through a pretty tough time about the last decade, and I think probably no more evident in that is that we had 35 short-term extensions of the highway bill over the last decade. Now, let's put that into perspective a little bit. 10 years, maybe that's not such a long time when you think about it. But when you put it into perspective, 60 years ago in 1956, okay, what's 2017, so it's 61 years ago, but roughly 60 years ago, that's when the first bill was signed into law to create the Interstate Highway Initiative, and the funding of that, the first gas tax that was applied to that, which is the forerunner of what we have now, that was 60 years. So 1/6 of the time, we've gone through all these little short-term extensions. Prior to that, every one of the bills was a 6-year or so bill. So there were, 5 bills, 6 bills in the first 50 years, and 35 short-term extensions in the last 10. And just think about that and put that in perspective. That's what we've been dealing with. And while we all celebrated last December in 2015, when the FAST Act was signed into law, and we thought, finally, we've got a 5-year bill, but it really didn't solve the funding problem. So this trust fund insolvency still is a challenge. And again, I'm hopeful that what we're hearing today is going to help us solve that problem. Now, in these last 10 years, our perspective is that some DOTs have been kind of changing their mindset from a broad selection of different, a mix of fixes to solve their problems, to almost an exclusive, or it looks like it's heading towards an exclusive use of preservation technologies, which are not really structural solutions. There's not a lot for concrete pavement in the concrete pavement industry in these types of repairs that are done. They may have some value, but they certainly don't. You can't continue to do those over and over again and really take and solve structural problems. So we see that as an asset management challenge that is there, and how can concrete industry play a role in that, and how can we ensure that DOTs don't get trapped into a mindset of that's all the money they have to spend, because it certainly isn't and shouldn't be. A mix of fixes is necessary to make that work. We need capital investments, and that's where our industry, we know, has a major role to play and can benefit from, certainly, but it also benefits the network of highways and in any state, in any region, in any county, and certainly across the country. So deferred capital investments is not a good thing for the concrete pavement industry. Here's what the volume of paving looks like over a long period of time. We were growing, as you can see, through the early 2000s, and then when the economy hit, there was a little bit of a lag for us. And then we declined back to about the levels we were at the beginning of the 2000s. And that's where we're at now. The last 3 or 4 years kind of stabilized. These are square yard figures per year that we get from either a bid tabulation summary from a company called Omen Systems or from our chapter measures. It's a combination of the two. And what you see here is, obviously is a decline, but a stabilization in the last 3 or 4 years. The good news is that during the same time frame, our share versus asphalt, I'll just fill you in nationwide, has been pretty steady, and I'd call it a slight uptick. So what's that mean? If we've come down in volume, so has the asphalt folks come down in volume across the country. Where has that volume gone? Well, it's gone to lost buying power, right? Being able to do less with the dollars we have, because we haven't kept up with inflation, but it's also been lost to this preservation mindset. So that's an issue. But the good news, again, is, or the upside potential here is that with additional funding, we could see these numbers turn around, and I think they will. Now, the FAST Act, again, has had very little impact. You can see in 2016 and our prediction for 2017, I'll take the 2017 prediction with a grain of salt, but we're looking at about a flat market prediction. So the FAST Act has not had an impact on us. Your local funding situation where you had the bill go through, and that's had an impact, and that certainly does. But understand that about 50% of the funding on average nationwide for a state comes from federal aid. So as these federal aid dollars are challenged, this is impacting on average about half of a state budget. There is some good news in these numbers, and that's on our overlays. We've done, again, for the last 8 or 10 years, we've done a major push on the technology and trying to understand it, work with it, and educate people on it. And we've seen some great growth in concrete overlays across the country. It's now roughly 12.5% on average of the volume of concrete pavement nationwide. So of all the square yards, roughly 12.5%. And we grew that from just, 20 years ago, or not quite, 15 years ago, being, around 2%. So it's been a great opportunity, and we're pleased at the agencies that have looked at it, trying to add an alternative overlay to their repertoire, and us working on it from the standpoint of innovating technology to make it work. Short joint spacing and other things that we've learned along the way that's helped us to get to this kind of a level. I think you can credit the good work of the associations, certainly here in Pennsylvania, and the counterparts as well as the Concrete Pavement Technology Center at Iowa State University, which has been very, very instrumental in this. And I think you've had presentations on this at past conferences. So that's a little bit of a look at where we're at as an industry as far as some of the bigger numbers. Now let's get into a little bit about ACPA's deliverables or initiatives that are going on. The first thing I want to mention is the OSHA crystalline silica ruling. Now this was released last spring, roughly about this time last year, maybe a little bit later. It's to go into effect in June of this year. And there are a number of organizations around the country, construction-related organizations that are working to see if they can change that ruling. As an organization, we decided not to go take it that direction, take a stance against it necessarily, but rather to try to provide information to educate our contractors on how to work with it and what to do. And so we created, we pulled out information specific to concrete pavements. We put together a technical guideline for it. There are some copies out on the registration table. You may have seen them, you may have picked one up. If not, there may be some more left. We didn't have that many copies here, but you can certainly provide, we can provide one to you if you're interested, or you can get one off our website. It's readily available off the homepage. So that's just something for you to know. There's new guidance out there to help you with some best practices and trying to distill some of the OSHA information down into something more manageable for a concrete pavement contractor or an agency with those interests. So our major interests, our initiatives in 16, 17, I've got 6 of them that I'll talk a little bit about. I mentioned the FAA P501 and the military 321311 specs and how that's eating our lunch a little bit in terms of working through challenges in the field. The good news is that both FAA and the military tri-services through the Army Corps have agreed to have the industry redline their specifications and make suggested changes to those specifications to give them our perspective. And in the case of the FAA's P501, they are in the cusp here of changing that and modifying their specifications. So we're presently actually redlining that, and we'll provide that input to them ahead of their process, their public comment period, which was a gracious offer from them that we're taking them up on. And then the military 321311, this is the first time I've been with ACPA almost 29 years now. I don't remember ever in 29 years the military accepting input from the industry on their specification, which may be a clue as to why it's so onerous to work with. But they have agreed. They have a new person that has come in to lead the technical side and has opened up this opportunity to us. And so we're certainly going to take advantage of it. And we've already started making some recommendations, but we're going to go through the whole specification. So again, this is maybe of interest to a few of you in the room, but it is a very important part of our market and what we do. Lobbying for the Highway Trust Fund. Now, the FAST Act didn't provide that solution, and so what we're faced with here is how are we going to offer back ideas? The Trump administration, we were invited, ACPA was invited into a listening session. It was interesting for us to, specific to transportation, and it was interesting for us to voice our concerns in that listening session. That happened in December it was during the transition team time. And we know that they're looking at different things. We hear different people talking about, how much PPP will be a part of it, how much will be associated with the Highway Trust Fund. You've heard the $1 trillion investment over 10 years. What I've heard, and I, take this with a grain of salt because you hear a lot of different things, but what I've heard is, 30 to 50% of those funds would be dedicated to surface transportation, bridges and roads. Now, if you compare that to the stimulus of a few years ago, it was about, a tenth of that, about 3 or 4%. So that's a better figure as we look at these dollars. And what we want to do, though, is going forward for this is we want to offer a real set of recommendations on how to fix the Highway Trust Fund. And we want to do it in terms of this tax reform bill that they're talking about. And that's one of the, I just saw a segment that said that, the public looks at tax reform as the highest priority. Now they're talking, there are all kinds of things being done right now by the new administration, but the way, at least the information that I saw, tax reform was really high on the public's radar screen. So within that reform, we would like to suggest ideas. And that's where this BOLD Act comes into play. We have signed on to support that, supporting ARTBA, American Road and Transportation Builders Association, who facilitated it, but it's not just their program. They had an industry group of high-level CEOs from a lot of companies, not just ARTBA members, but high-level corporate CEOs. They came together to look at ways that we could offer back tax fixes that would provide the solution not only to restore the buying power, but as you can see on this chart, it would take almost double, or more than double, really, the funding over time to be dedicated towards surface transportation. So it's a pretty, I can't get into the details because I can't get ahead of the folks working on the team. They're still looking at it. But what I would say is there are 5 specific proposals within this plan that would be ones where we could very definitely offer back as solutions to this problem. And they're different than what we've talked about before. And that's what's exciting about it. I just give you one peek behind the curtain, and that is with regard to the gas tax. We've talked about, and ACPA has been right there with everybody else, maybe even at times at the head of the line, saying, raise the gas tax, raise the gas tax, raise the gas tax. It's the easiest solution. This plan actually lowered the gas tax. 180 degrees out of phase of what we've been talking about. You lower it, but when you lower it, you index it. And there's the other 4 solutions that go along with it fill in the gap there and then also allow it to grow forward. So it's an interesting and different dynamic. It gives something for everybody to get behind, whether you're a Tea Party person, a Democrat or a Republican, doesn't matter. There's something in here for everybody to get behind. So we're pretty excited about this. Now, the next item is kind of related to what I talked about last year when I was here, but that's pushing for fair pavement selection policies with regard to competition. And we've done a lot of work studying bid tabulation results, and we can very clearly show a relationship between when there is competition between industries in a state, that the unit prices that you're paying for both materials in that state are lower. What's that mean to a state? It means that you've instilled competition and you've got increased buying power with your taxpayer dollars. And so it just happens that the FHWA already has that as a requirement in their policies. And so, but we don't believe that, based on the evidence that we see, what's happening in states, Pennsylvania's quite a bit improved, I think, in the last few years, but in other states where we just don't see that the state is taking that into account, and therefore the FHWA is not enforcing their policy, is what our view is. Just to give you a little bit of a look at that, here's a map that shows those figures, and in those states in red have, based on bid tabulation results, no more than 10% of their dollars are spent on anything related to concrete pavement. And a lot of those are not at 10% level, they're at 5% or less. It's some apron here, a little bit of piece there, but it's not any meaningful concrete paving work. Now, those states in gray, including Pennsylvania, are those where more than 20% of their program is spending on pavement dollars is focused on concrete paving. So you can see more or less the central swath of the country is in a little bit more of a competitive situation, and you know, the southeast, you know, some of the west and the northeast are in a very limited. They're really a one pavement focused type of operation, and this is not good for the taxpayer, and it doesn't follow FHWA policy. So we're pushing pretty hard on that issue, and we'll continue to do so, because not because we deserve any market share, but because it's, first of all, it's law, and second of all, it's good policy. It was good policy back in the early days of the interstate construction when it went in, when the concrete was the lion's share of the work going on, and the asphalt folks needed competition in order to get a chance to play, and it's certainly the same now, even though maybe the roles are a little bit reversed. Does it have an impact on prices? Absolutely it does. And these are graphs that were put together based on that bid tabulation, publicly available information, and this has been corroborated by MIT, by Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and so these figures really do bear out that competition creates what you would expect it to from Economics 101. You know, it will provide a market impact on the unit prices paid, and a bigger bang for the buck. I'm not sure what that little... John, Microsoft PowerPoint has stopped working according to whatever's on this screen, so we'll see where we go from here. Hopefully it'll just go away. It's not up there. Anyway, our next item was developing a unified design software system. So we've taken everybody in the industry, ACPA, PCA, and NRMCA, we've taken their pavement design software, we've looked at each of it, and we're going to bring it together and provide a unified system. It's going to allow you as an engineer to design any type of pavement using any type of cement-based solution, and it will be available on the web. Let's see what I can do here. Is this going to go? Yeah, I can't move forward. It's stuck. I don't know why. Well, let me see, what do we got? Okay, unified design software. I'm gonna flip ahead without it until we get it going again. That will be available on the web. It will be free to use, and just where we're at, we're tracking to complete this software the middle of this year, and I think we're gonna make our goal. We started that process last year. We've got a major software developing company helping us with it, and we've got guys dedicated. ACPA is leading it, but again, PCA and NRMCA, our industry partners, are equal financial partners in the effort. The next item was developing and attracting younger folks to get involved in the association, and with that, what I'd like to say is, you know, we're going to see a lot of turnover in our promotion staff across the country. And I've heard from every contractor that I've ever talked to, they challenge to get good folks to work. The DOTs have gone through a lot of attrition. Pennsylvania, I'm sure, PennDOT is no different. And a small effort that we decided to take on was to, through our foundation, the Innovative Pavement Research Foundation, which has an educational component, to go ahead and see if we could create a matching dollar situation where through our foundation, we will match dollar per dollar if one of our chapters wants to bring somebody on and wants to expose them to what the DOT is doing, what contractors are doing, take them to a construction site, give them an education about the concrete pavement industry. That would be part of it. And then, of course, give them some project work to get some value back out of them as an intern. So it's an internship program that we're starting. It's kind of maybe a parallel to some of the STEM programs that you might have heard about in some of the bigger companies, but it's something we're doing for the association and the industry through our foundation. So we're starting out modestly, but we're excited about it, and I would encourage you, if you would like, I know, when you may contribute personally to different causes or things that are important to you. If you feel like there's a way that you would want to give back, we would allow that through our 100% tax deductible contribution to the foundation to help with that program. I always say that every one of you in the room somehow got your start through one job, and suddenly you're in an industry and you got exposed to it. Some of us don't even know how it happened sometimes, but you did. You just took one job for that to happen, right? So maybe we can get students exposed to that through this program, just one of them at a time, and that's what we'd like to achieve through that. So you'll see flyers like this. Thank you for getting me back on track. You'll see flyers like this out at the desk. Then lastly, I want to talk about, again, advancing pavement technology. And this is where I want to start. This is the question: how do we advance? You can think about different ways you could look at this. The agency has a responsibility for specifying clearly what they desire. The industry works for the agency. The contractors have the contracts with the agency, and their role, the contractor's role, with the support of their suppliers and the industry folks, is to deliver clearly what is desired. And as I was thinking about this in relation to all the technologies that are out there that we're working with, and I wanted to break it down to try to understand it better and maybe help everyone else look at it maybe differently. Because sometimes I think when everybody's responsible, you've heard the term, no one's responsible, right? And I think there's a few things that are specific to this, how we advance this industry. I think that the responsibility for advancement in terms of new technology and on the DOT side is to be focused and diligent about implementation. Take the risk. Not just continue to do what you've done, but take the risk and do new things and try them. And then, of course, the industry's responsibility back to meet in the middle, if you will, to advance, is to be innovative, is to look at how can we make this work. If a new technology is being implemented, it's up to the contractors then to work with it and make sure that it works. Innovate on the idea. Now, we do that, and you can begin to move things forward if we're meeting in the middle. But it takes somebody to take the first risk. No one likes to be first. Doesn't matter if you're a DOT or a contractor on the industry side. There's always a reluctance to be first. That's where the most risk is. But in our business, the DOT has that responsibility, I believe, to be the ones to take that risk to implement and to put that forward. Perhaps the most important word on this slide, however, is the word clearly. Right? Where do we get hung up? Where are we hung up right now with the airport market? We're hung up in specifications that are not clear. And when I was in school, what I always learned was that, what I always thought, and I think that's true of a lot of students, you go to engineering school, and what do you want to do when you're done? You want to design stuff, right? That's the cool thing. I want to design. That's, that's the part that gets exciting. That gets everybody's juices flowing, right? And what do contractors want to do? They just want to build it. They want to get out there in the dirt and the mud and mix concrete, and they want to build it, right? But the most important document that we have in the process is the specification. And in my opinion, specifications don't get a lot of respect in our business. They're also very challenging in this idea of how do we advance. And I've chose old Rodney here because it's about respect for that part of the business. And this little saying, you can't try what hasn't been specified, but you can't specify what hasn't been tried. How often has that hung us up to not advance, right? We don't get anywhere unless somebody has to try it, but nobody wants to go first. And you can't do it, a contractor can't innovate unless it's specified a lot of times. So that gets you hung up. I heard a statistic a couple weeks ago. I'm going to put some numbers up here. How long do you think it takes in our industry to implement new technology? Is it 3 years, 10 years, 16 years, or 21 years? Anybody think it's 3 years? 10? 16? How many 16s out there? All right, quite a few of you 16. How about 21? Anybody think? One guy. All right, if I had something, I'd give it to you. 21 years is what I heard was a statistic on how long it takes to implement something in our industry. And why is it? It's because you can't specify what you can't try what hasn't been specified, and you can't specify what hasn't been tried. That hangs us up all the time. So we have a process for innovation. You ask challenging questions, you identify needs, you develop solutions, you implement the solutions, and then you test, evaluate, and refine, right? And you go through this cycle. But quite often we stop. We stop when we implement, and gee, it didn't work quite like what we thought it would on the first shot. And that's what, it's a bad, that's a bad technology, or we can't do that. Now, the most important part of this process is implementing the solution and sticking with it, and allowing the contractors and allowing the industry and the agency working together to innovate. The next important part, how things happen, is people. You've heard it takes a champion, right? What's a champion? A champion's just somebody that's not going to give up. They're just going to keep going until they get it, until their vision of what it is going to be realized. And in our business, it takes everybody. It takes the contractors. It takes the folks in the industry like myself or John or, Rich. It takes the manufacturers and suppliers, all the folks around the outside of the room here that have done their own innovations to try to provide, keys to make things work. And then, of course, it involves the agency folks at FHWA and state. So people make it happen, and it's intentional. It's not something that just happens haphazardly. It requires taking risks. It requires investment. It requires collaboration. All of that's important. Now, I'm going to tick through really quickly all the different technologies that we've got. We got performance engineered mixtures. I know that there's been some work done here in Pennsylvania on that. Ternary concrete mixtures, the super air meter, the resistivity test, the box test, it's part of the performance engineered mixtures. There's internal curing, Northeast Solites in the back of the room. There's internal curing as a technology. There's new mix plants that are out there, or plants with new controls that are much better than they were before. This is all new technology that's maybe hung off of existing stuff that we maybe take for granted, but there's new things there. There's maturity testing, which I know Pennsylvania's looked at. There's concrete used for resurfacing, the overlay stuff that I'm going to show you the value of that in a moment. There's recycling and two-lift paving. The long life paving, that's where you guys have focused a lot of your effort, on the long life paving. There's the next generation concrete texture. There's dowel bar insertion. There's zero clearance paving and stringless paving and smart curing. Those are all technologies around the paving machine. There's as well a real-time smoothness, which I guess has been tried here in a pilot program or two. There's long life dowels. We've got a manufacturer here in the room. Precast paving, we've got that as well here. Mechanistic pavement design, I know that's something. There's a lot of stuff that's available and going on out there in our industry to make things better and to advance. And what I'd like to, there's even some more here. RCC, this different type of pavement. I think there's an exhibit out in the hallway on that. Reinforcing or reclaiming layers for base, the reclamation. And I think, John, you told me there was a pilot project or two on that. Dowel location sensors, non-destructive testing for thickness. It's a whole host of things out there. It takes this teamwork. That's where, Jeff, your thought this morning, I think, just fits right in here. It takes the team to make it happen. Our view is the most of what is that technology with the most impact potential? bar none, concrete overlays. It's readily available. We've done a lot of work. Here's an existing, a brand new project. It's now on the ground. It was built just west of Springfield, Illinois. It's one of those 6 by 6 by 6. That means 6 inches thick with 6 foot by 6 foot spacing. You don't get a lot of bending in those slabs, and that's why you can put loads on it without concern of being too thin at 6 inches. It actually works structurally very well. That's something we learned we never thought of before. This is what it looks like. You can build that under traffic, even on an interstate pavement, although I think it probably shines best on a facility that's a little bit more of a two-lane, two-way rural type facility. That's what that project looks like. What's the potential? The potential of that is amazing. It could double the square yards of paving that we see as an industry, and it's really something else. So I'm going to conclude here. It's our responsibility to advance technology. And of course, that's a big part of our mission, and something that we are keenly, obviously, aware of and doing. We need more options. Somebody has to take the risks. It'll improve our quality, and our partnership working together is obviously key. So I appreciate the opportunity to deliver the message. I want to mention one opportunity as well this summer. Our mid-year meeting will be in Pittsburgh, and you'll see more information about that. And we will be inviting anybody from PennDOT that would like to come, or of course, all the local industry folks. You're all welcome to join us at our mid-year meeting in Pittsburgh, and we'll have more information about that in the coming weeks and months. So that'll be the middle of June, June 12th through the 15th. So thank you very much.